From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Learning about ag around the dinner table.
I'm hoping for more of a grounding in food, in general in food systems.
How these grad students are taking class to a different level. Another leak is detected on a natural gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea.
Very much seems like something that Russia has done.
Is it a case of sabotage? And Hurricane Ian's path of destruction continues.
As you can imagine, it is pretty devastating.
Where the storm's heading next and what it's leaving behind in its wake right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Hurricane Ian is strengthening again as it moves back over the Atlantic Ocean. And now hurricane warnings are back up, this time for the entire coast of South Carolina. The storm slamming into Florida's southwest coast with 155-mile-per-hour winds on Wednesday, along with record-breaking storm surge. These scenes showing what's left of Fort Myers Beach. The storm then pressing on through central Florida, still carrying high winds, life-threatening flooding, and torrential rain. Many of the counties in Ian's path are major producers of ag products, and the University of Florida says that includes more than 200,000 acres of vegetables, over 180,000 acres of hay, and 95,000 acres of field crops, including sugarcane, cotton, and peanuts. There are 375,000 acres of citrus production, not to mention more than 3 million acres of grazing lands.
As you can imagine, it is pretty devastating. You know, when that storm came on shore yesterday, making landfall, heavy wind, rain, inundation, and the surge. And what it really does is left the place almost unrecognizable in some places.
Now, it could take days before ag losses are tallied as people in the state deal with power outages and flooding that's making it difficult to check on farms. Orange juice futures jumping again on Thursday on the threat of damage. The state's orange production was already expected to be the lowest in over 55 years ahead of the storm. And it could be another weekend of weather problems in the southeast. Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire has a look at where Ian is heading next.
That's right, Clinton. If you just take a look behind me, here's rainfall, radar estimated rainfall from the hurricane as it again devastated parts of Florida. Reports of rainfall coming anywhere from 1 to 2 feet across the parts of Florida. And now this is kind of heading out to sea again, going across the Atlantic, where it's going to cross warm waters and will likely re-strengthen back up to at least a Category 1 hurricane as we head through today on Thursday. That's why you see that red there for more flooding. That's going to be the main issue, as well as that storm surge for parts of the Carolina coastline and even up into the Virginia states as well. The only good news with this, though, is this area does need the moisture. Here's a look at our root zone map here across the Carolinas, Virginia up to upstate parts of New York. Again, they do need the moisture, just not the catastrophic flooding from this event. Walking through this on future radar, again, you see it kind of moving on through the Carolinas and then continuing to start beginning to lose its strength as we head closer towards this weekend. Once we get into parts of Friday, right on into Saturday, that's when we should start to really see it starting to officially lose its steam. And folks in the Carolinas are rushing to bring in the crops ahead of what's left of Ian moving in. Bill Crowder says this is video of Kip Robertson picking a mighty fine cotton crop before the rain rolls into eastern North Carolina. Now, the USDA is reporting in its latest crop progress report on Monday that only 2% of cotton crop had been picked, but 80% of the cotton bolls are open. I'll have more on your AgDay forecast coming up.
U.S. officials say Russia is the leading suspect in the Nord Stream pipeline leak investigation. A fourth leak was discovered in the pipelines connecting Russia to Germany. A German official said there was a very strong indication the leaks were acts of sabotage. Now, NATO says it will retaliate for any attacks on the critical infrastructure of its 30-member countries, saying the damage to the pipelines is of deep concern. AgDay's Michelle Rook talked with John Wenzel of StoneX about those pipelines. Wenzel is an energy specialist and a Navy submarine officer.
When I heard the word leak, the first thing I think about is how in the heck do you get a leak 700 feet down on a 2-inch pipe that has 2 tons of concrete per foot encased on it? It just doesn't happen, especially in 2 different spots. Very few nations have the capability to have that kind of sabotage. clearly, I mean, from the first time I saw it, I'm going, somebody had to blow those two up. Very much seems like something that Russia has done.
Now, some theorize if Russia is behind those leaks, it's to try and make European countries turn against efforts to isolate Russia economically as energy costs rise and with winter approaching. That kind of sabotage may be considered terrorism, and here at home, experts say agriculture needs to stay vigilant. During a Farm Journal web event Wednesday, Security and Strategic Advisor on Food and the Agricultural Supply Chain, Andrew Rose, spoke at length about the potential threats to U.S. farms, from the usual concerns like foot and mouth disease or African swine fever, to threats from activists or foreign states, to warnings about corporate espionage at businesses. Rose says bad actors are also using social media to try to drive action. He's been looking closely at the recent spate of fires at food processors.
I think what someone has done is sort of coupled these together and created a headline around it. The fear that I would have is that somebody who felt very strongly about the animal processing or animal production side of things would see that as a green light, would see that as something that they wanted to emulate.
Now, you can hear more of his tips to protect your farm and improve cybersecurity by heading over to farmjournal.com and look for the Farm Country Update under the News tab. California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a bill that aids efforts by farm workers to unionize. The law gives farm workers new options to vote to unionize beyond a physical polling place. Proponents say that will help protect workers from union busting and other intimidation. Farm owners say it lacks necessary safeguards to prevent fraud. We have the grain stocks report being released later today. So what could tight stocks mean for corn and soybean being harvested right now out in the field? We'll have details and talk about it next in analysis. And later, sharing a meal. That's about much more than eating, what these students are also learning about ag in the country.
Hello, I'm Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. At the United States Department of Agriculture, we work hard every day to ensure that rural Americans can thrive in the communities they love. That means we invest in their businesses, lands, and families. And for the past 40 years, all of you at AgDay TV have been on a mission to make sure that these same communities are up to date about the issues from weather to market data that impacts their lives. Thank you for being a source of information for our rural communities, and congratulations on nearly a half a century of great work.
Cotton markets are unraveling under pressure from waning consumer sales. The Wall Street Journal reporting cotton futures prices have lost 25% since late last month. It effectively eliminates gains following a forecast that drought would severely limit harvest and supplies. Now, cotton prices have been trending higher during the pandemic, but clothing sales have been sliding amid broader shifts in consumer markets. Manufacturers are forecasting falling sales as people turn to food and fuel. Happening later today, we'll get a new grain stocks report from USDA. Ahead of that report, AgDay's Michelle Rook talks with Don Rose about the harvest for corn and soybeans and what a year with tight ending stocks could mean for both.
Joining us with market analysis is Don Rose, U.S. Commodities. And Don, we normally see harvest pressure in corn and soybeans as we get into the onslaught of harvest. Do you think that pattern or seasonality will be any different this year because we do have short crops in a lot of areas and tighter stocks?
Well, I think you have to be very careful, Michelle, because this could be, if you back up over history, short crops we hear about has a long tail. And by that, we mean that we put our tops right in the gut slot of harvest, and then you drift lower into the spring because the end user is so concerned, so nervous. So he buys the supplies as the harvest is going, pushes us up, but then he's out of the market here for the rest of the year for the most part. And there's no big carry in the market. In fact, just very little carry in the market. So there's very little incentive for the producer to sit on supplies. And so maybe you see a pickup in selling also from a merchandising standpoint.
So what is your advice at this point? Will cash basis levels stay strong, and should farmers be selling off the combine, or should they store?
Well, I tell you, there's very little incentive for a producer to store. I mean, when you have zero carries in the market, when you have the basis levels that are historically tighter than normal, usually that's a signal to a merchandiser to move the supplies out because you're not going to get a return on your investment. If it's good for the merchandiser, I would say it should be good for the producer. If the producer wants to continue to own supplies, nothing wrong with that, but make sure you switch it to a different tool. You can go out. We're seeing producers go out into July, no carry in the market, and buy some calls or some call options out there, just in case we have a market that gets into a dry drought condition again next year in either South America or the U.S. So change your ownership is what we're seeing, Michelle.
All right. Some good advice as always. Don Rose with U.S. Commodities. More AgDay coming up.
For all your risk management and trading needs, call one of the U.S. Commodities specialists at 800-247-4071.
AgDay is brought to you by MetLife Investment Management's Agricultural Finance Group. MetLife Investment Management is positioned to help you grow your business with a competitive farm, ranch, and agribusiness loan. To learn more, visit investments.metlife.com/agriculture.
Drought and dryness still plaguing parts of Texas. Texas A&M Forest Service saying on Twitter it responded to 13 wildfires just this week. Now, it says very dry conditions have combined with dry vegetation this week to create these fire conditions in the western piney woods, southeast, and central Texas. Andrew Whitmire joining us here with our national forecast. And Andrew, those dry conditions, pretty good setup here for some of these wildfires.
It is, and you combine that with some breezy winds, and that's where there's an elevated fire risk across parts of the southern plains. We're going to focus on that, as well as, again, the impacts from Ian today as it's going to cross parts of the Carolinas. And we are also watching a high pressure dome across the Midwest and Great Lakes states. That's going to keep Hurricane Ian along the coastlines there of the Carolinas up towards the Virginia coast as well, and kind of prevent it from working its way further inland across the Ohio and Tennessee River Valley, and it's going to stay active across the Intermountain West as well. Let's take a look at that elevated fire risk for today across the extreme southwestern Kansas and the extreme northwestern portions there of Oklahoma. We've got a kind of a low pressure system that's going to be very close to the area for today, and combine that with some breezy winds that are going to pick up and relatively dry humidity layers out there. That's again going to cause the potential there for some higher fire danger for today across parts of the southwestern plain states. Meanwhile, again, all eyes on the hurricane out there as it's going to continue to again bring us with it flooding as well as some storm surge to parts of the Carolinas, and eventually we're going to start to see this system beginning to weaken here as we head towards the weekend, as it will begin to work its way across Virginia, West Virginia, even get maybe an isolated rain band or two even as far north and west as Cincinnati here, but again, high pressure up to our north and west. That's going to kind of keep this system along the coastline states here as we go throughout the late week and into the weekend as concerned. Let's take a look at our precipitation estimate here. And again, we are going to be dealing with lots of heavier rainfall. Wind really not the concern here with this. It's going to be, again, more that storm surge right along the coastline, as well as that heavy pockets of rain that are going to be moving on in. We could be looking at the rainfall rates right along the coastline there, approaching 8 to upwards of 12 inches in diameter for rainfall. Meanwhile, further inland across parts of West Virginia, likely looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain with that system. Meanwhile, we'll be watching a few scattered rain showers out across parts of the Intermountain West, as we'll have a few light systems trying to work their way through parts of the Intermountain West. Let's look around the country. Let's take a look around parts of the area. Roanoke, Virginia, rain developing, high 63 degrees. Liberal, Kansas, mostly sunny and breezy. Fire danger concern out there. In Glasgow, Montana, chance of showers and breezy, high 75 degrees.
With drought conditions persisting, how can producers dealing with drought keep cattle fed? Some advice now and going into winter next. As we discussed earlier in weather, drought conditions persist in the plains. Kansas State cow-calf specialist Jason Warner discusses some things producers can do to keep cattle fed during drought and in the coming winter.
The lack of moisture that we've seen this year has certainly proven to be very challenging for our cow-calf and stocker operators, not only located here in Kansas, but throughout a number of the close surrounding states as well too. And so certainly drought conditions are on the forefront of the minds of a lot of producers. The most important thing that we really want to emphasize when we talk about drought management strategies is the importance of having a plan and developing that plan and sticking to it. And that really comes back to managing our forage inventory and understanding what our forage inventory situation is and how we're going to manage that inventory as we go forward. Here in mid-September, we're past the point of our typical seasonal peak forage production that we see on our native warm season grasses. And so any additional moisture that we receive later on this fall over the next couple of months is certainly going to be beneficial for our cool season forages and also any winter annuals and cover crops. There are many areas where grazing crop residues following harvest is very common, but for a good number of our producers that may not necessarily utilize those residues for grazing beef cattle in the fall and winter months after harvest, these drought conditions may provide an opportunity where folks can be able to utilize those residues. So the thing to keep in mind with grazing crop residues, regardless of whether it's corn or milo residue, is that our forage quality does decline throughout the grazing season. It's the highest quality that it's going to be right initially after harvest, but being able to graze those crop residues can be very valuable for our producers to provide a lower cost alternative solution and extend our grazing season. They're potentially saving some additional harvested forages and not have to feed those harvested forages quite so early in the fall.
Coming up, taking ag learning out of the classroom. From the farm to the table, we'll head back to college in the country. How does food travel from the farm to the people who need it? The University of Kentucky is offering a new class on sustainable food systems. As Jeff Franklin reports, the students got a lot of hands-on experience.
Great poultry as a way of...
The University of Kentucky's Horticulture Research Farm was the first stop on the week-long food systems tour. The students gathered there for a brief overview of UK's organic farming unit.
And I just think it's fascinating. It's kind of like a Kentucky travel wish list, being able to hit Marksbury and App Harvest and all of these places, as well as sit and discuss it with a really diverse group of students.
The next stop after UK's Horticulture Research Farm was Marksbury Farm Market in Garrett County, which produces high-quality, local grass-fed meats free of antibiotics, steroids, and hormones. Marksbury partners with area farmers to produce high-quality products. Students got to see behind the scenes of their operation with meat cutting and packing and other areas.
We've got 45 restaurants throughout the...
Following lunch at Marksbury, there was a conversation with Kentucky Department of Agriculture officials.
Obviously, this course is meant to provide a lot of opportunities for graduate students to develop connections across the different disciplines, but it also has benefits for faculty. And together, I think, I am hopeful at least, that there will also be an opportunity for additional research.
After the tour of Marksbury Farm Market, the rest of the week included visits to other Kentucky farms and food systems players, both rural and urban. When the fall semester began the following week, the class then settled into a once-a-week meeting on campus at UK's Food Connection, an applied food systems center serving farmers, producers, students, and the community, both on campus and across Kentucky. Each week, the students prepare a meal to share together, followed by class meeting and discussion.
So we'll meet once a week, one evening per week, where we'll have more of a traditional class, but done through kind of a food connection and food systems lens, where the students will be having a lot of discussion, but we'll also be cooking a meal together, and sharing class over a meal, with an emphasis on local food.
And it was the kind of course that I had always wanted to take in grad school, and I could finally take it.
Christian Keeve, a doctoral student in geography from Florida, is taking the class.
I'm hoping for more of a grounding in food, in general in food systems. But also to see how these topics are being discussed from such a wide variety of disciplines.
Keeve calls himself a small-scale seed grower and thinks the class will be really useful for him. From the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, I'm Jeff Franklin.
Now our thanks to Jeff Franklin for this story and all of the stories he's sent us over the years. Jeff is retiring from the University of Kentucky after 31 years. We wish you all of the best, Jeff. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Thanks for watching. For all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.